Well, first of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to interview me. And as for being involved in theater, I started doing it around 8 years ago when I was a sophomore in high school. And before that point, during my freshman year, it was a very dull, depressing, uneventful time for me. Then sophomore year came along and I was taking a playwriting class because I love to tell stories. And the same instructor that taught the class was also the artistic director for South High School, which is where I went. And she was directing a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, one of Shakespeare's most well-known comedies. And curiosity got the best of me, so I stayed after school. I auditioned. I got the role of Phyllis Strait, and essentially got hooked. Been doing theater ever since. Did it all through the rest of high school, then through college, and now here I am in the Fringe Festival.
Can you say a little bit about the production you're doing for the Fringe this year?
Well, it's a play that I wrote, and it's gone through quite a few rewrites and a few reworkings through the dialogue and the direction in order for certain things to make more sense. The original draft took me like 2 nights to write because things were going through my head at around 100 miles an hour. And this play is called An Autistic Life Through History. And what this is essentially is a young autistic man takes you, the whole audience, on an adventure into his head. And in his head is an imaginary world fueled by his imagination and also his knowledge about what his greatest loves were. The dinosaurs, the Ice Age, the Roman times, Shakespeare, and and a little bit of socio-political dramas that are going on in our world today, all crammed into this show. And essentially, the reason why I wanted to write this show, and my main motive, was because all around me and all around everyone else that I know is that there are lots and lots of movies and lots of television shows and plays that address autism. And I'm very happy about that. Very, very much. The autism awareness is rising, and that's a great thing. But I'm concerned that this issue runs the risk of taking on a very cynical, I should say, view about it, as in autism's just a disorder and nothing else. And the word autism becomes almost synonymous with conspiracy theory about vaccinations and how, you know, people have always struggled, and they have, and I have. I'm no exception about this. But autism is also just a different way for people to perceive the world. They perceive things differently. They think on a different level and in a different rhythm. And this often involves a very unique kind of imagination. And so I wanted to write a story that simply shows that. It simply shows inside his imagination that he is having an adventure throughout history and throughout evolution, throughout his life. And it's a world where life, evolution, and history become one and the same.
So, for those who don't know, can you say what it's like to be autistic?
It is as though it's kind of, you're living in a world where, it's like you're living in a world where people will call you out on something at any moment, even if they don't intend to. You'll always get something wrong, you'll always be doing something wrong, and when you're trying to tell somebody what you're feeling, exactly how you're feeling it, it won't come out correctly, and so people will often like become more scared of you or become misunderstanding, and then you end up being more vulnerable to people who will pick on you and more and more alienated by everyone else. And it also can lead to a lot of, this condition ends up leading to a lot of individuals being, I don't want to say so much, I don't want to say self-harmful, but self-deprecating. They're incredibly self-critical of themselves, and when they become more frightened and confused, they would end up having certain physical reactions, and then luckily most of them that I know of have people who will calm them down, have people looking out for them. Some even have pets to look out for them. And it can be very hellish a lot of times, but it also can provide a unique way of seeing the world. There was a documentary that my folks did a long time ago called Through Our Eyes, and it was talking about parents and their children who were autistic, but all of the interviews were of the parents. You don't often, it's not that you don't often see the world through autistic eyes, it's just you don't often get to observe the power and the magic that someone with different perspectives and with different ways of interacting and functioning can imagine and build a world and a story through their eyes.
Can you say something about kind of what the magic is like?
With the magic, the only rules there are your own. You make your own rules, and everybody else now has to abide to them. And these rules revolve around how the world functions. Like, for example, like if you're going, like in your childhood, when you're a kid, you're not necessarily a human being. You would be a dinosaur, because you would love dinosaurs, and I love dinosaurs. So whatever opportunity I get, if I want to tell a story, I want to have a dinosaur be in it and be like a significant character and not just an obstacle course to overcome like in Jurassic Park or in any other science fiction movie. They are basically the hero, or they are like a very optimistic and wise character. And it is also people can a world where people can go on adventures and discover themselves in ways that they never thought they could before. Like, say, the ability to recite Shakespeare, the ability to be a performer is actually a real superpower and not just something that you do to get people to like you. You can actually use it to save the world or actually help someone go through their struggles or their trials.
So, what kinds of interests have you had over your time engaging in these magical adventures? I mean, you mentioned dinosaurs. Any other major kinds of preoccupations or interests?
Yes, there is of course the theater, which might border along the line of along like self-congratulating, but theater has been a big thing for me and lots of people who are autistic. When either doing big, tough, risky plays like Shakespeare or by Chekhov, or doing writing your own stuff like I'm doing for the Fringe. And another thing too is there's also ancient history. Ancient history has been a very, very big thing for me, and it has been because, well, I tend to be a little more into ancient history than modern history, because modern history, there's a lot of complicated stuff and it was hard for me to keep track of, new laws, new technologies, which is funny because, you know, there are autistic people that are very much into technology, but at the same time, it's like building this new stereotype that anyone who's on, and it's a stereotype that's been upheld by Hollywood for a long time, is that anyone who's autistic is just some savant robotic genius that can count all the toothpicks that fell on the floor within a second, you know, like in Rain Man, or can decode super codes like in Mercury Rising, which I felt was a stereotype that was harmful, as in it set me up at school to be completely made fun of when I got something wrong. But ancient history is also very fascinating because it's the way that it's not so much a simpler world, is that it's a world where you had to like use more of yourself, as in life wasn't so easy in the ancient world to live, it wasn't so easy to fight, and there was kind of a more mythological edge to it, and living in a time when you literally had to speak as loud as you could to get people to hear you, and you had to fight with a sword or a shield to overcome an opponent, and not easily just press a button and drop a bomb or something. And I think the geopolitical struggles of Rome and Greece and Persia and all those states could exemplify, kind of have been like the source of the issues that cultures and societies face today.
So, do you have a favorite ancient character?
Oh, I have quite a few. There's Themistocles, who's pretty much to me like one of the most badass Greeks that ever lived. I mean, he got a movie about him last year, 300: Rise of an Empire, which I never saw. But then again, you know, that's Hollywood. And there's also the most famous ancient guy, Julius Caesar. But you know, he always had his deal going on, and Shakespeare's got something about him. I have a lot of ancient warriors that I like, and I think it's because they were, to me, the bravest. The ancient warriors were the bravest people I know, because they had to fight in the most difficult and the most risky way possible. In a way, it's like an ancient warrior can be drawing a parallel with someone who would be autistic because of the level of risk. With someone with autism, there is always the constant risk of being misunderstood, being made fun of, and then being harmed or attacked in an unfair manner. And for an ancient warrior, it's similar. You know, there's always a risk that you're gonna, you know, you're not pressing a button safe at a distance. You can't easily hide. You have to go out and fight, and that's when, you know, anybody can get at you, and the harm that can be inflicted upon you can only be as much as what you can do to deflect it. And I think that does go in line with the harm that could be inflicted on someone who is autistic or who has a mental disability, could be as much as how that person can manifest themselves in life at any time.
Now, with all of the interests you had, how did you select scenes for your play?
Well, the only way I could do it is simply select them through stages of life. And I don't want to give too much away about the show, but I do describe it in the description on the website. So, the dinosaur age is childhood, because there are so many kids that love dinosaurs, and growing up when I become a teenager and adult, I'm still like wanting to check out dinosaurs. And when I go to places like the Science Museum, and I want to go to a place at the bookstore that is mostly dinosaur books, those are mostly in the kids section. So, you know, dinosaurs are almost like, you know, all about with kids. So I kind of put the dinosaur age, the Mesozoic, with childhood. And then the Ice Age would be high school, because high school is very tough. It's also very awkward for everybody, not just more so with people with autism, but basically with everyone. And the Ice Age was a very, very tough and harsh time for all kinds of human beings, from Neanderthals to Cro-Magnons to the hobbits creatures living on Southeast Asia. And then when ancient civilization starts, it's almost like, you know, people are now building institutions, they're building nations, they're building buildings, pyramids, roads, and armies. So they're all like jobs. They're all like corporate jobs. So ancient civilizations are like corporations. And that basically happens when, in young adult life, when you're done with school and you either would like go to a higher education, or you get a job, or both, or whatever. And that's also can be pretty harsh, as you will see when you see the show.
So you say this play kind of forced itself on you one night, the writing of it. How did it come about? What made you decide to write it?
It came about in exactly the same way as life on Earth came about. It developed over a long period of time, and 99% of the time I had no idea what was going on. It was all inside my subconscious. My consciousness was focused on doing things at work and doing things at school and doing other shows, And but in the subconscious, this story and this world started brewing and started developing. I mean, for 4 long years, I was going at being a beginning writer, and I was writing just pieces of junk and crap. I mean, for 2 years, I tried writing this, you know, dark romantic play about a guy and his girlfriend, and you know, that was not going anywhere because I didn't feel that was really me. I thought it was. And then for the next 2 years, I was writing like 10-minute, 40-minute long like plays that were like, you know, about, again, romance and fairies and pirates and like, you know, people hanging out at bars. And I'm like, nah, this is not really doing it for me. Some of them were better than others, but I don't know what's going on. And then one night, sitting at home, looking over all the scripts I wrote, and then, like a volcanic eruption, the idea of the world of childhood, life, history, evolution, all the things that I loved and all the things that I like to look back on my life, merging together as one, and then whoosh, it just exploded out of my head and was like, hey Dylan, here I am, right here. And I went, all right. And I had to start just typing it down, and I typed it down over the next 2 nights.
And what happened as you went through the drafting process? Did it change much?
Well, most shows in the Fringe their first drafts are around like 40 to like 100 pages, and they had to shorten them in order to fit that particular venue. With me, I had to make the play longer because it was only 30 pages, because it really did burst out like that. It was a little big bang of world with dinosaurs and Romans, and then I was like, it was only 30 pages, and the play, the time limit for shows is 45 to an hour, and when I had it read at the Playwright Center, it only took like half an hour to read the first draft. So I'm like, okay, I need to make this bigger, I need to make scenes longer, I need to add a little bit more historical stuff in there. And my dad and I went over it when he decided to be the director, and I picked him to be the director. He was my first pick. And there were a lot of different points in which he felt, okay, it doesn't make any sense, and he put out suggestions, so I rewrote certain lines so they would make more sense, better for the context of the play. And who better than my father, because he's been an actor himself since high school as well, and he has been acting and directing in plays in his hometown, Green Bay, and at the University of Green Bay, Wisconsin, and then he's been doing it at Peninsula Players, which is like the Guthrie in Wisconsin, and he's been doing it in Chicago, and he's been doing it in the city, so he's a very well-seasoned guy, and which makes it perfect. And so there were like, overall, there were like 4 versions that I wrote, until, not versions, but it went through went through re-editings 4 times.
And what kind of initial response did you get from like the Playwright Center reading?
Everyone said it was a very fun, smart play. The only criticism that I got was that there was one scene that went on for a little too long. That because it does seem that certain representations of history do seem a bit lopsided. And so I basically went to work with evening it out, and that was basically it. But yeah, a lot of people everyone basically just loved the play. In fact, when I had all the different people read the certain parts, there was a woman who read a role, not to give too much away, but there's a saber-toothed tiger in the play. And after that, she sent an email out to the rest of the members saying, I want to be a saber-toothed tiger and everything from now on. And I was like, okay, I know what your dream role is.
So was it hard? I mean, as a first-time playwright, getting it cast?
Well, it all depends on planning and where you go and the right time for people to come and audition. But it was hard because we had a lot of people to choose from for certain roles, and we had to scramble to find someone for another role. Like, well, my dad basically said that I could play, you know, the main character Thomas, and so there's that. And then we went to the Fringe Unified auditions, which were way back in April, and there were tons of candidates for the character of Catherine, who is like the artistic character in the play, who is like also Thomas's buddy, companion, love interest, and so there were tons of candidates for her. And there were also quite a few candidates for a couple other characters, but the main role that we were mostly concerned with was the role of the antagonist of the play. And Marcus is his name, who represents all the people in history that were like vying for power and dominance. And we did get lucky with an actor, Brian's his name, and he's like a very active actor around the Twin Cities. All the different French companies wanted him, and he's doing something at the Guthrie, and he's well experienced too, and he's very talented. I mean, quite a few times in rehearsal, the way he portrays his character really made me laugh, because this is written to be a comedy first and foremost, and so he's a very comic, funny villain, and he's just, the guy we got for him is just great.
So you lucked out with your cast.
Big time. Big time.
Great. So I'm curious, talk about your dad doing the directing. What's it like to grow up in a theater family?
It's funny, because believe it or not, never once did either my mom or dad ever encourage me fully to go join the theater or be in a play. My mom encouraged me to do band, she encouraged me to be a football player, she encouraged me to, like, I think become a Buddhist at one point. And then my dad, you know, he didn't really encourage me for any theater choices, because as a kid I wanted to be a paleontologist or the crocodile hunter like the late Steve Irwin, may he rest in peace. But the one who kind of encouraged that, who suggested that I should do theater, was actually my sister, Claire, because at one point my dad was going through some problems and I was concerned, and I expressed it in a very dramatic, cinematic way, you know, and my sister was like, yeah, you should be in theater. And after a while, the opportunity to do theater came along, and I just figured, all right. But my parents really do have a habit of recognizing, whenever they're watching television, whenever they're watching a movie, they recognize which actors, who they are. Oh my gosh, you know who that is? That's this actor, I saw her in so-and-so. And then they always talk about their days in the theater and in the arts, and when they were doing plays and shows in Chicago. So they make a lot of references, and my dad and mom did shows around the cities when I was growing up, so I did see some of the shows they were doing, and I saw shows that their friends were doing, and my parents were very as everyone around our friends and family knows, that they are very eccentric, animated, creative people.
Yeah, you're lucky. Really lucky.
No doubt.
Those folks.
No doubt.
So, this is the first play you've actually had produced, right?
Yes.
Are you to the point of thinking of yourself, at least for the next 10 years or so, as a playwright? I mean, is this your identity?
In a way, yes. I remember an article I read, and not just an article I read, really. I remember some individuals, well, let me put it this way. In the theater and in the show business in general, you have tons and tons and tons of actors and performers who mostly rely on being casted and impressing auditioners enough to get cast in a show that they would think is good enough, and a production that is well managed enough for them to be considered for more work. And that's how I've been doing it for most of my career. I've been, you know, I auditioned, and most of the plays I did were through school, South High and Minneapolis Community and Technical College. And I basically worked my butt off with the roles I had, so I could, the directors and people who would see me in shows would want to cast me in other parts. That's how I always went at it. But then I remember there were some individuals who did their own thing. They created their own work. They wrote their own scripts, and some of them had friends, so they got cast. And I remember an article online, I forgot what article, what news place wrote it, but they talked about how I think that the theater world needs to take a step in another direction, in which we need more artists that can manage their own future. So, and I thought about it for a while, and I figured, wait, how did I get started in theater in the first place? Because I was taking a playwriting class. Why did I take playwriting? Because I like to tell stories. I like to tell stories, I like to perform, tell stories, perform, put them together. So for at least the next decade until some kind of bankruptcy happens, in which I would have to go back to school and get a job like as an accountant or a computer technician. I would see it as I'm doing what I can to manage my own work and manage my own future. So I write my own thing and I perform in it and get other people together to do it. And whatever opportunity we have, whatever chance we get to put it on, and in a way to promote so I can connect and work together with other people that I know. Because I do have a lot of connections in the theater, but I think as an actor, I can only be grateful that they would consider me for roles, but as a playwright and as a producer and as someone who is managing and putting on their own thing in this context, in this kind of festival, would strengthen and raise the chances more likely of people that I know would want to work with me, and so we can work together on things.
Right. So what you imagine is maybe refining this show and taking it to other places, writing other shows with yourself as a prominent character, if not, in some sense the main character, and then casting them and getting them out. That's the idea?
That is the heart and soul of the whole thing, as well as the mind and spirit. And I do hope that if this show succeeds enough in the Fringe, whether it wins the contest prize of the 6th performance, because each Fringe show gets 5 performances, but whichever show in whatever venue gets the most sales will have a 6th performance. But if it's popular enough, it will get a remount. And so if we get a remount at a later date, or if some other theaters are interested in having it put on in their venue at a later time, when we're not restricted by the time restraint of the Fringe, I would love to make this play go from 47 minutes to 2 hours, so there's so much more stuff I can add, put in there, and so the bias of history won't seem so lopsided in this.
I see. So you're going to add the rest of history in?
Pretty much. Because it's not just the Romans. The Romans were always the most prominent part when it came to my interest in history, but there were other people too. I think there were these guys like the founding fathers of America, but I don't know that. I don't know what they were all about.
Well, it sounds way exciting. I know so many people who, they work some kind of job to be able to do that and to make it work. And so, what do you hope people will take away from this show? I mean, what do you hope to do by presenting a play about kind of an autistic person's view of, or role in, or interests in history? What do you hope to do for your audience?
The main thing is that I hope to give the audience a new perspective, like any playwright or any artist would want to change people's perspectives on things, different angles, different ways of looking at something. What I think people would take away is that, autism is not just about the controversies of the vaccination, or simply people who would struggle, even though that is very real. And not that the story does not have struggle for our character, it does, but in a way as if it's not so much I have a disorder and it's, other people are mean to me because of it, but rather I'm going to do something great and I'm going to do something for the world, and there are challenges in the way, and the way how those challenges come about is being manifested by the imagination being brought by the autistic mind. And so it's not just, the autism isn't just like a disorder that's a problem. The autism is a certain special element that is overlooked and could be incredibly useful for the cause and purposes of artists around the world to want to give new perspectives so they can teach the common people and their audiences.
Right. I expect an interview like this wouldn't be complete without a little bit of a plug for the Fringe. And the kind of opportunity it gives to first-time playwrights like yourself to get their work out. Can you say a little bit about your relation with the Fringe and what they're doing for you in this thing? Just for somebody who might be sitting out there thinking, well, I have a play in my head. I wonder if that would be an interesting way to get it out into the world.
Well, first and foremost, I have to bring up that when I got into the Fringe, I was very lucky because it's all lottery. And so you have a show, you want to enter the Fringe, the first thing you got to get past is the lottery, and it's luck of the draw. So there's over 460 applicants to that lottery, and only a quarter of that are picked. And so, yeah, just have your fingers crossed, knock on wood, and like throw salt on your shoulder every time you spell it.
Mm-hmm.
And once you are picked, it all is a question of keeping in communications with the main managers, and they will provide you the venue, and they provide you the lighting technician, and they provide you they also provide you complimentary tickets once you get all your liability waivers in. And they will help with publicity. There is the website where you have a featured panel, and you gotta pay like $100 for that, but it's not too costly, but it will be very helpful in getting attention. There's also the previews, and there was an opportunity for me to be interviewed by representatives of the Fringe to have a certain scene filmed, but I couldn't do it because I had work that night. But they do help out whenever they can. They also would select shows for audio description, which means they will read the play and describe it, what's going on, to people who are blind. And I think it's amazing. And my play was actually selected for that, so just had to get the script into them as possible to avoid any kind of confusion. And yeah, just understand what you will have to do, and they will do for you what you will need them to do, and then hopefully I'll be able to put on a good enough show that it will all come through in the end.
Another possible kind of viewer for this, for the show we're doing now is somebody who has autism and has struggled with it in various ways. Can you say anything about what the theater has given you and what theater might give somebody with that? What kind of an advantage it might be, or disadvantage, or problem, or how do the theater and autism go together?
Let me address the problem first, because I think the problem kind of, in a way, would serve as some kind of testament to whatever solution it might provide. The problems with someone with autism going to the theater, as I've experienced time and time again, is that it is incredibly intimidating and incredibly challenging, especially if you have a director who has been doing theater ever since like the golden age of Hollywood and entertainment, and they're very demanding, and they can also at times get very agitated and screaming when you're not getting something right. So when any kind of miscommunication happens, very likely they might end up screaming at you or even insulting you at one point because they're so emotionally charged. Has happened to me a couple times. And there is just the directors who are very, very sophisticated. They're very, very smart, very educated, but they're just very energetic. And so everything is just going like that, and you just have to keep up with them. And then there's also the egotistical co-stars that you will have, and they will tease you, and they will try to get smart with you in certain ways, and so you would just have to learn to get smart with them. And it can be, and most of all, there is also the subject matter of the shows you will be doing. A lot of shows you do will have incredibly complex historical context, like in the Chekhov plays, or like in any play about the Great Depression, and you gotta look into that, and then you gotta make sure you fit that right. And those are challenges that were never, ever, 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 ever absent from any production I've ever done. Not even this one, really. Now, if you love the theater that much, if it's not just a place where it's not like you can be cured of it, but rather you can use it in a way that you've never been able to use it before, and the best way to use it is to become a character and to live in a world, an exciting world of drama and comedy, and where you would have an opportunity to make a difference as another character and make some difference as a performer for someone and making their entertainment. The best part of that is that you can use your imagination to the best, fullest extent when it comes to interpreting a character in a way that no other actor can interpret, and present a character in a way no other actor can present. A certain character that can talk to the audience, to people who would have autism and people who don't. And finally, I remember the show, one of my favorite television shows, Slings and Arrows. At one point in the show, a director is telling an actor playing Hamlet to calm him down. All you have to do is connect. With autism, you always have so much problems and trouble connecting with the outside world. And that is one of the definitions of the disorder, of what they would call a disorder and the condition. But in the theater, even no matter how weird you see the world, you will connect with everyone. The director, the actors, sometimes the playwright, the audience. You can connect, and that piece of the puzzle will be put together.
Thank you.